and welcome to Royal Oak Archives. I'm Wally Stump, filling in for the vacationing Jeff Tunnigus. We have a special program for you today, for we will be talking to Mr. Wally Gabler, who was a city commissioner from 1960 to 1964, and was also a county commissioner. Mr. Gabler has been very active in Royal Oak activities. Wally, welcome to the Royal Oak Archives.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and welcome to our home. We're happy that you're able to be some interest to the city of Royal Oak.
Well, we're thankful for you and taking your time, from your valuable time, to talk with us. And this is such a pretty day. We thought we'd bring you this program from Mr. and Mrs. Wally Gabler's yard.
Well, it is a beautiful day, and the flowers are out, and the grass is green. What more could you ask for on such a beautiful day in June?
I agree with you, sir. Wally, I understand you were born in Sayre, Pennsylvania. And when did you get to Royal Oak?
Came to Royal Oak when I was 4 years old, when my parents left the little town of Waverly, New York, where my father was in business, in the real estate business and in the jewelry business. Came to Royal Oak in a big old Chandler touring car. I can just barely remember some of it. There was my older brother looking after me, and we came to Royal Oak in 1924. And my father first built a four-family flat, I think you called it in those days, in the city of Hazel Park on Pearl Street, and then moved into Royal Oak out in Northwood. At that time, my father went to work for J.F. Cotton Company, which was a old building on the corner of 4th and Main Street, where you had to go up about 3 steps into the jewelry store, and he worked there for some time, and then eventually opened his own business at the corner of Washington and 4th Street, or next to what was then the old Royal Oak Savings Bank, before they tore it down. So the family moved in to Royal Oak and became part of the community. The community wasn't that large then. Streetcar tracks went up the middle of Washington Street off of Woodward, which was only paved in, I think about that time, it was just 2 lanes, and then they began to put the 4-lane highway in. And the streetcar turned off of 4th Street, off of Washington onto 4th, down to Main Street, and came right up to what was Catalpa Drive, and that's where the streetcar stopped. Also at that time, there was an interurban system that carried freight and so forth, and came right up through Royal Oak on the same tracks until they got to Lincoln and Washington, or Lincoln and Main Street at that time, where Billings Feed Store is now. It's the big electric terminal. And that track came right up by this property, right up Main Street. And that's was part of the construction here, and what of that was the first bridge was built over that track went over the Vincetta Creek, or what's the Red Run Creek. It goes by this property, still does. But now it's the 12-town drain. Back then it was Red Run Creek. That's, of course, changed the whole area.
So this lake then was part of the river originally?
Part of the creek and pond, and served somewhat as a ice pond for the village and the city back at that time, prior to the subdivision going into it, being subdivided by the Donderos, M.A. Dondero at that time. Subdivided. But Royal Oak was a wonderful community to grow up in. With all our family was, I had 3 brothers and a sister. eventually my father bought the house at the corner of Hudson and Washington, where the streetcar went by, and we didn't even hear the streetcar, but anybody that came to visit us always wondered what all that noise was. And it was good transportation then. For 12 cents, you could go all the way down to the river. 6 cents down to 8 Mile Road, and you had to get another transfer for 6 cents all the way down to Jefferson, I think it was. But Royal Oak was the town. Then as I grew up, one of the first things I can remember, there wasn't the Washington Square building. I remember it was an old apple orchard, and we had a lot of fun in that. And then the Washington Square building was built, and most people in Royal Oak know that Mr. Madison designed it and was a longtime Royal Oak resident. Wonderful family. In fact, the funny thing there was my two older brothers helped the Corsos dig the well that supplied the cooling for the Washington Square building. And the post office was over on 4th Street, where now the new Salvation Army that is. The town progressed and grew and it was the center of all activities in this area. Much bigger than Ferndale. You want to remember the Royal Oak First Methodist Church was one of the first in the whole area. In fact, Ferndale was a missionary church from the Royal Oak First Methodist.
It was.
St. Mary's was a very early church here. And then, of course, along came the Congregationalists. And the Baptists were very active and built a beautiful church. It's now out there on University and Main Street. So it's a town full of nostalgia.
What were some of the schools that were here then?
Well, of course, one that's gone now that was very dear to me was the Washington School, right across from my home, across from the bakery. And I went to school there until I went up to the old junior high school, which was now where the Pontiac dealership is. Named Clara Martin Junior High, but we just called it. And in fact, when I was a youngster, that was the high school, and my oldest brother went to the high school and was the first class into the new Royal Oak High School, which is now Kimball High. So then, of course, eventually we got to Kimball High School and started up. But when there was Franklin School, if I remember right, or Grant, I beg your pardon, it was Franklin. Grant, now I think it's Franklin that is gone. First you say what was here then. It was Longfellow School. For a very short period of time. For some reason I had to go there for a year. Some transfer back and forth. But then there's outside of Royal Oak, which Royal Oak ended at about 12 Mile Road then, was Oak Ridge, which later became a Royal Oak, part of Royal Oak. But it was quite a city. The main activities, of course, were at 4th and Washington pretty much then, because that's when Montgomery Ward was in. Right. It's the big center of activity. And in the theaters, of course, there was the first one I can remember is the old Royal Theater. It was over on Main Street, just north of 4th. And then that was owned by Mr. Mr. Kimmel. He had 2 pretty daughters, I can remember that. And then there was the Baldwin Theater, which is now the Washington Theater. When Mr. Kimmel closed the Royal, he bought the Washington Theater. They changed the name, renovated it. And then, of course, in the Washington Square building, we got the big Kunsky Theater, which is now the Royal Oak, and that was a big changing landmark. The Washington, when the Washington Square building was built. The one thing about that Washington Square building, many people don't realize, but that was the very first supermarket in the whole United States. Was the on the long what is now Washington Drive was the I'm trying to just forget Lorry Brothers had a I think that's the right name if I recall, had the first self-serve supermarket where you went up and down and served yourself and went out a checkout line. And obviously that was something that caught on the rest of the world, I guess, as far as that goes. So, interesting.
What were some of the other businesses that were in town at that time?
Oh, of course, there was Kleba's were here for years, at different locations. And of course the paddling store that was at the corner of Main and 3rd Street was the fine clothing department store at that time, which changed somewhat. Then, of course, we had Lawson Lumber Company, which was the oldest operating. And when they went out of business, of course, Hagelstein's Bakery was the oldest. It was established in 1911, actually by my wife's grandparents. And her mother and father, of course, took over the Hagelstein's Bakery at the death of her grandmother. And then we became involved in the bakery at the death of my in-laws. So that was one of the founding businesses in Royal Oak. And of course there was Herb Lumber, and we had another big lumber, because remember Royal Oak had the railroad that was very active then, and it was the center of the freight area. And everything sprung out from that. Berkeley began to grow, and Boston grew, and Boston was established when they got a $5 a day at Ford's, and they began to build.
That was it.
And even there was some activity out around 15 Mile Road and what we called Hollywood part of Big Beaver, which was Troy Township, of course, that town, before Troy was a city. But there was a well-established town. I hope I'm not. Oh, we had a Kresge store and a Woolworth store right on Washington. Where a fine Woolworth store, where now that very fine outfitting, outdoor outfitting, camping store is just that's a outstanding business. But that was the old Woolworth store. And of course we had Grinnell's, which was a fine music store. Go down and at one time, of course, the Daily Tribune was located on Washington Street, about 5th for top, and there was a dress shop in there, RB shop, which later moved over to Washington Square Building. A number of shoe stores. There was down there, one of the oldest was the Florsheim shoe store. It was run by the DeJulius brothers, 2 bachelor men that walked every morning up Washington Street by our house. You could set your watch by it, because the DeJulius brothers walked by the house, you better start running to school right then.
So that was your clock then, huh?
Oh yes, they were wonderful people, and they kept the franchise until the last of them died.
We'll be right back after a short pause. Welcome back to Royal Oak Archives. We thought we had talked to Carolyn Gabler, Wally's wife, on how the two met. Carolyn comes from an historical Royal Oak family herself. Her maiden name was Hagelstein, a name made famous by Royal Oak Bakery. Carolyn, how did you and Wally meet?
Well, I don't know if I want to put all that on television, but however, we met when we were 9 years old when we went to the Washington School. And Wally only lived a block from our house, and he came to work at the bakery. And then he went away to college into the service, and I went away to college. And when he came back from the service, we were married. down on 4th Street in Royal Oak at my family home.
And he was in the Air Force then when you were married?
Yes, he was a first lieutenant in the Air Force. And, and my sister and I were the only two in our family. My parents died prematurely, and then we inherited this house. And she sold her property down on Troy Street, and she sold it to where they have the Royal Oak Library.
Oh, that was her property then?
Yes, So, but the windmill and everything have quite a strong attachment because my uncle built dug the well, and so that was a strong attachment. But
and how many children have you?
we have 3 children, and 2 boys and a daughter. 2 boys went to University of Michigan.
That's
and
good.
Daughter went to Michigan State. And Soul House has lots of stories.
Right.
All the football players from Michigan.
That's what I understand. Your 2 boys played in the Rose Bowl.
Yes, they did. They did. And our daughter is a designer now, and she's a teacher at Wayne State. So, but other than that, I think we just lived a happy life.
Well, you both look great.
We try.
We've been married how long?
51 years in July.
51.
51 in July, you know.
Well,
so
fine. Very good.
we've had a lot of activity and happiness in this old house.
Well, I'm sure you have.
Well, you fellas like to sit down and have a little refreshment?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Ah, boy, that tastes good on a hot day. Wally, what was the first mayor that you remember?
Well, the actual mayor that I remembered was Bill Hayward. And he was mayor for a long time in Royal Oak and did a lot of public service. He was, and he later became a state representative. And then, of course, I remember George Dondero was the first mayor, but as I recall, but then I really knew him as a congressman, and we knew his family. Of course, we were close. Stan Dondero became a judge, and then Bob Dondero is still with us and still playing a saxophone, doing a good job.
Right, he plays with the Hotel Savarine Society Orchestra.
That's correct.
And they do a wonderful job too. Wally, when did you first get interested in local government?
Well, when I came home from the service, I wasn't in very good shape, and I had an interest at what was then the old Royal Oak Hospital. It was on the 6th floor of the Washington Square building. And then there was a problem with the question about the subsidies from the city of Royal Oak to the hospital. And on the urging of Bill Button, whose son now runs the Button U Rennet place in Royal Oak, I threw my hat into the ring and ran for city commission. Well, I lost the first race and then ran the next 2 years and was the leading vote getter.
Well, you were pro tem then.
Then I was mayor pro tem, that's right. And it was a lot of fun, had good friends on the commission. And that time, Kurt Potter was the mayor, and I stood in for him for a few times. And, you know, we had a lot of fun at there. And, big thing that I think we laid the groundwork and for taking the old city dump and turn it into the Royal Oak Golf Course. And I think now, of course, we have 2 in Royal Oak, which is a big asset because any city that has open space and proper recreation facilities is a fine thing. We have some very fine parks. For instance, one of the finest is Wagner Park right behind us.
Yes.
Very good. So
tell us a little bit about your city commission reign.
well, it was fun on the city commission, and then of course I ran for county commissioner after the city and became active for some 20 years in the county. I ended the last 5 years there as chairman of the Oakland County Board of Commissioners, which we had a lot of accomplishments. The whole county of Oakland changed. My biggest contribution, I think, was one of the contributions anyhow, was the purchasing of the Pontiac Airport from the city of Pontiac, and I served as chairman of the airport committee for about 15 years. And we also established bought the Troy Airport, Troy, Oakland, which was Burr's Airport.
Right.
And we bought the property from Rockwell International, and that is a big asset for this county. Many people don't realize that the Oakland Pontiac Airport is the second busiest airport in the 5th Regional District.
It certainly is.
Only to O'Hare in Chicago. So it's a busy thing. It's been good access. Many fine days.
How do you see Royal Oak changing?
Royal Oak was in a slump for a while, but it has certainly come back now.
What has?
With all the restaurant activities, and of course the final completion of 696 changed everything. And we are right again at the hub of the transportation system with I-75 and 696. And hopefully the commuter rail system will begin working again. And we have the railroad, of course, which is a lot of people don't like the noise, but when you're here, you get used to it. And it's a tremendous asset to this city. Royal Oak is coming back. The thing that's so pleasing to me is I drive through all the various subdivisions, how well kept the homes are. Very rarely do you see a home in Royal Oak that does not have the grass mowed and the paint finished, and Royal Oak is really on the way back. Real estate prices itself will let you know how Royal Oak is coming back.
Very much so.
So now it's one of the key places in the area. And a lot of people that moved out way out have come back to Royal Oak for the convenience. They found out they don't have to drive 15, 20 minutes in horrendous traffic to be in the center of activity.
Now, Wally, your house is beautiful, and it's one of the landmarks for the city of Royal Oak. When were the buildings made? What were they made of, and who made them? Well, first this subdivision was subdivided by the Donderos. M.A. Dondero subdivided this in 1923, if I recall. And at that time, just the old farm house that's across here that, of course, has been renovated, and the barn was back down behind where now 6 beautiful homes set. And he had a lot of vision, and this then, of course, was Royal Oak Township. The city limits ended at 12 Mile Road, but then there was additional annexing, and it spans on up to 14 Mile Road now, of course. With the exception of the cutout of Clawson. But the homes, of course, are all brick, and the home that we live in was built in 1938 by Donderos. Since that time, my in-laws, God rest their soul, Howard and Esther Hegelstein, finished the upstairs and made it beautiful. Since we've lived here, we've added onto the basement and the new kitchen, and so it kind of grew like topsy, everybody. And he added some garages underneath, changed the heating and all this type of thing. But it's English, half timber, kind of a cottage, and we enjoy it. Now the windmill, is that wind-powered or electric?
Originally, that windmill was there to pump water and also generate electricity on a 12-volt battery system. There are switches in there that are, you'd think it was a railroad terminal, but it's the old 12-volt low voltage that ran a line over to the farmhouse and one bulb down to the barn. And then later, it was the well itself was built by my wife, dug by my wife's uncle, Rudolph Hegelstein, who did a lot of well digging around this area. And then later, it was made into when Don Durrell built the house, he made the picturesque Dutch windmill effect, which was very picturesque. And it's been hit by lightning twice, and we've rebuilt it twice. When it was burned and hit back, oh gosh, I guess about 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, we had to bring some people in from Yes, it is 20 years ago. We had had a hard time finding somebody who knew how to rebuild a windmill. And we finally had couple fellows from out of state and came and stayed and rebuilt it. And then the last rebuilt was done by a local fellow named Jim Marquardt. His parents lived on Vincetta for years. And in fact, his wife went to school with us. His mother went to school with us. And Jim Marquardt did a fabulous job of rebuilding it just last year and put the rail back on. And so we've tried to keep it up the way it should be. We kind of think it's a shame to have it then.
Well, you and your wife have seen a lot of Royal Oak history.
Yes, we have, and Royal Oak has been just a wonderful city to grow, to live in, raise your family, and do all those good things to make for good living.
It is a nice town.
It is, and it's the streets have been improved, and we have a good city government. And I sometimes wonder if the general public appreciates the dedication of those people that sit on that city commission and face the critics that are over beyond the rail, on the other side of the rail. But they, Royal Oak is just a fine place.
And different cities have different themes. And I think a good theme from Royal Oak would be the City of Dreams.
Well, we always called it there was Grant Howell, who was the editor of the Daily Tribune for years. Grant always called it a city of homes. He and I were at divergence sometimes when I was on the city commission because I wanted to mix a little more activity in some apartments downtown. And they're come back eventually. I wish Grant could hear me. I said, I'd like to say, Grant, we were right, because look at the tremendous development we had down on Washington and Woodward and the apex of Main Street. You can't have a healthy city without having people downtown.
That's true.
And now it's so nice to go down there and see people walking on the streets. Sometimes I have a tongue in the cheek when I see the fellows with their ponytails and their hippie makeup, but I guess that's it. It's been very nice. Yeah.
Well, Wally, we want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us on Royal Oak Archives, and it's been nice of you to take the time, and we appreciate it very much. And once again, thank you for being our guest.
Thank you.